knowing what's out there involves conversations with people who work in the field and a clear understanding of everything that's out there. Because once you understand everything that's out there, you can apply your experiences and you can apply your strengths.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Happy Farm D podcast. Today, I'm super excited to welcome back one of our very own Happy Farm D coaches, Sandeep Chakrabarty. Welcome again to the podcast, Deep. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Chris. It is awesome to be on with you again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So today we're going to focus on some key learnings from a coach's very own perspective through his personal career, and then we're kind of going to go into as a coach and learn more about roadblocks he's seen personally and from the coach's perspective, and how he found ways to overcome those, and some success stories in between. But I'll let you really quick go right into a brief bio about yourself, Deep, in case people haven't heard you on the podcast before. So please fill people in with a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Chris. So I've now been a pharmacist for 14 years, and I started my career in retail pharmacy. I graduated from Rutgers University, and my first role was as a float pharmacist at a Target. And then I was able to have some successes early, and I took on my first leadership role 2 years post graduation as called it a pharmacy business partner at the time, but equivalent to a pharmacy district manager, literally 2 years after college at Target. So thereafter, I was a pharmacy district manager for 8 years, 5 of those years with Target, and then I moved on to Rite Aid. And so in total, my first 10 years of my career was in retail pharmacy. And I loved it, believe it or not. I mean, PDM sometimes get a bad rep, but I think it depends on the person. It depends on the team, and I want to say my pharmacists enjoyed working for me. I enjoyed working with them, and it was a really good deal. I loved, at that time it was coaching, helping them achieve their potential, and all of those great things. And it was a really, for me, I had a lot of fun doing it. When my first, I guess, big transition came, I mean, I did change from Target to Rite Aid once, and there's some learnings there actually too. But my first big transition away from retail came. Rite Aid was sold to Walgreens, and I had 24 stores. And at that time, 14 of my stores were going to go to Walgreens, and that meant I was going to go to Walgreens as well. And so for me, that meant, literally starting all over, because senior leadership was going to stay with Rite Aid, and all of the relationships that I was able to build, I'd have to start all over. And so that was a time for me to, start just poking around to see what else was out there. And thus, through several different things, including your network, including the right opportunity, including building my story, having a great interview, and then a little bit of luck, everything coming together at the right time, I transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry. And my first role in pharma was where I am today at a large French pharmaceutical company. And my first role was a associate director of retail strategy, and can go into a little bit of what that is later. But it was a right fit for me. And then you hear in the title, retail strategy. It built onto what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Since then, this about a year ago, I was promoted to a role, director of value and access. And that was essentially, what I do is I work with payers, and I build a story for our products for payers. And that's completely, if you asked me 14 years ago where I'd be 14 years later, I don't think that would be my answer, because I don't think I knew that job even existed. So, so that brings me here. So that's my career. And then with Happy Farm D, I started 3 years ago, around the same time I left retail, connected with Alex online, and we had a lot of similar visions, and he asked me to be a coach with him, and I've been coaching now for 3 years, over 50 clients. I have a little Excel sheet that just helps me keep track of everyone I've spoken to. And I crossed the 50 mark at the beginning of this year, and a lot of awesome and amazing stories and amazing people that I've met through this. So that is what brings me here, Chris.
No, no, that's awesome. And congratulations on the 50 mark. That's awesome. And I'd love to hear. So let's kind of back up to when you were, because I know for a lot of people are going to be like, wow, that's a big change, right? To go from retail to pharma. So how did you? Let's back up to your position when you were in retail still, and then you made that transition. What kind of led you up to number one, I guess, wanting to make that transition? What interested you in switching fields? And how was that to kind of make that almost 180 in a different direction for a career change?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think a lot of it is at that time. So one of my big career philosophies is, take control of your career. Don't let your career control you, right? And if I stayed the path I was going, which was having to go to Walgreens because somebody told me that I had to go to Walgreens, it kind of feels like your career controlling you, right? Like that's the point where everything would have been great, and I think would have been, but it would have been much of the same. It would have been saying, hey, people above me made these big decisions, and I have to kind of go with the flow. Versus this was, okay, let me really take control of my career and say, you know what, I still have that Walgreens option, but what else is out there? And so it starts with saying to yourself, okay, now is the time, right? Because it takes a ton of work to switch careers, especially with something you've never done before, you don't know about. And so you got to be at a mental state, I think, to say, all right, you know what? Like, let me leave my comfort zone. My comfort zone would have been doing the same, but this is leaving my comfort zone. And then starting to put feelers out there, telling people that you are now looking to change careers, right? And it started with, my wife's been in pharma for 14 years. It started with a link that she gets all the time that she flipped over to me, and she didn't know anything about the position except the word retail, right? And she's like, look at this, retail, right? And I didn't know anything about the position except it had a fancy title and the word retail. So I guess, before I get too into it, to answer your question, it starts with a mindset change, right? That I'm ready to take a risk. I'm ready to make a change.
I love that. And in terms of, so let's say you walk me through that. So you got through the mindset. You're like, I'm ready for a change. Now, I think a lot. I correct me if I'm wrong, and you've probably seen this with a lot of your clients, as I have too. Making a change is very scary. I feel like a lot of people have that initial hesitation to jump out of their comfort zone, to leave what they've had for so long, right? I mean, and you were in retail. You said 10 years roughly, so that's a big change. That's kind of scary to just move out of that. So, but I love the aspect of taking control of your career, not letting it control you. I love that. So what do you say to those who are kind of like, I don't know, that's a huge, I don't feel comfortable jumping out of that. I've been doing this for so long. I mean, how do you overcome that? That's I think it's also just kind of a personal struggle internally to kind of overcome that. But, and I'm sure, did you feel that when you were
Yeah.
thinking of doing this as well?
Well, here's the thing, right? You don't have to stop to start. So it's not like I said, all right, I quit. I'm leaving retail, and then I start looking, right? Like there is a safety net built in there. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it's, yeah, although some people are brave enough to say, I can't take it anymore. I quit. Most people don't, and you don't have to. So you continue to do what you're doing, but then you start looking outside of what you're doing, right? So it's not like I stopped. I was still going down the road of, all right, I'm going to transition to Walgreens. I was going through the interviews. All that was happening, right? Parallel to this. But the reason that sometimes doesn't work is having that safety net concurrently. You don't put the energy necessary to make a transition to making the transition. So you kind of, your timelines are extended. Like you don't really have timelines. You're like, I'll get to it when I get to it. And that's why some people, I think that's one of the things I see is you really need to focus on making a transition. There's a lot of stuff you got to do. You got to do it quickly. Jobs don't stand on the market long, right? And you have to do that in parallel to your regular job that you don't really want to be in maybe anymore. So that's a commitment. That's a big time commitment. It's an energy commitment, and I think that's a lot of overcome. Your question was, how do you overcome that? It's saying, I'm not leaving. Like, I still have, a paycheck coming in, right? I still have, I'm still going to my work, but listen, let me put a concerted effort into making a change. So, most people have that safety net. And even if you don't, I have clients that have left their last job, right? And I think at that point, it's actually easier to make a change because you are looking and you don't have something holding you to the last job. That's easier. I think, but when you're doing both, I think that's harder, but it's also, in a sense, easier too. So you got a little of each in all of that. But yeah, mindset, energy, focus, timelines, all of those things.
Gotcha. No, I love that. And in terms of when you were making that initial transition, were there any roadblocks that you personally hit when you were trying to overcome anything, or just even just making that decision? As I know you were internally deciding, do I want to stay with my current role? And then you saw this position that your wife shared with you. What personal roadblocks did you have to overcome?
Well, for one, familiarity, right? I mean, 10 years in retail, it's all I knew, and I was really good at it, and I was on an upward trajectory, right? So to stop that kind of trajectory and success and start over, that's like a personal, roadblock that you have to overcome, is familiarity. That's like what you've done, what you know the lifestyle, the people, the job, you do it in your sleep, the paycheck, right? The dollars associated with the job. And so you're familiar and you're comfortable. So I think that was a hurdle. Not knowing what I was getting into was a hurdle. I think that was a hurdle personally, as well as for these interviews. I was like, what is this job? And I had to literally go line by line through the job description and try to make sense of what the job was. And later on, I learned how I made sense of it was probably not as accurate as what the real job was, right? So yeah, I think those are personal roadblocks. The other thing I would say at the time, I just, the thought just left me. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
No, and
there's
I kind of want to
yeah,
I want to kind of hold on to that moment there though.
yeah,
So because you were kind of described like, and I think a lot of people listening maybe were like, maybe I am interested in pharma, but like you said, I'm not really sure how to describe maybe a certain
yeah,
role, or a lot of different companies probably have a different description or title for something that can be similar, right? They might call something
yeah.
a little different title, but it's very similar in role. But for someone who maybe is in retail or something, hospital or what have you, either way, it's a big difference, right? So for those out there who are maybe like, maybe I would be interested in making this transition, I'd love to hear, because I know you've worked with past clients as well who have been able to do this. And I think another big internal struggle is, well, I have no experience in this. I don't have a background in this. How can I even start making a transition here? But I'd love to hear a little bit about, I know you personally did it, and also you've personally helped others do it. I'd love to hear a little bit about like walking through that process and how you helped others make that transition.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of questions I think in your question. The first is, what jobs are out there? How do you like recognize it, what's what? And you have to talk to people, right? There are so many different roles. And if we talk about pharma specifically, and I think this goes for anything, but let's talk about pharma. There's so many roles within pharma that a lot of pharmacists are unaware of. There are common roles across the industry that you'll see over and over again. And then there's specific roles like the one I got into, which are very specific to that moment of time. Like if you were looking for a retail strategy and operations role, uh, right now, I would be surprised if you could find that same title and role, because it was a role that was created for that moment in time, for that need for the company, right? But those types of roles pop up. Those types of specific roles pop up in various areas all the time. So the first thing is to getting to know pharma and talking to people who are in it. And that's really where I start with my clients, right? Is because, we try to take stock of everything they've done, right? And then I try to, match that. Essentially, it's three things that we match. It's your experiences, what your strengths are, and then thirdly, what's available, right? It's like a three-legged stool. And when we get to what's available, that's where I get into all the different jobs that that exist in pharma, right? And so then you match all three of them together. All of that has to come together, right? Because I think sometimes people forget, you're interviewing for the job, right? But the job is also interviewing you. It's got to all match together. They are looking for skills that you bring, and you have to match your skills with what they're looking for. But all of that, you need to know what's out there. You need to know what kinds of jobs. I think, when people hear pharma, the first thing that comes into mind is MSL. I think that's gotten very it's gotten very sexy, like the MSL job in pharma. And it is. I have lots of friends in leadership positions at MSLs that are regional MSL directors or so forth. And they love it. They didn't start out as an MSL. They got there. And I think, there's many roles that, you could get there. So I think, just to wrap it up and answer your question, I think knowing what's out there involves conversations with people who work in the field and a clear understanding of everything that's out there. Because once you understand everything that's out there, you can apply your experiences and you can apply your strengths.
I love that. And I know, going back to quickly your own personal experience. So I know you started out, you made that transition, and then you eventually, you said you recently got promoted. So it sounds like in terms of pharma, for those who maybe, again, don't really know too much about it, but have a little bit of interest in making that transition, that there's a lot of room for growth. And like you said, there's so many different types of roles. Is that correct in pharma? Like that and it seems to be just growing and growing more compared to possibly other fields of pharmacy.
Yeah, for sure, right? So everything I spoke about is that initial transition. That's where everything has to match up, right? And for me, the match was, retail strategy, 10 years of retail. If I'm looking for somebody for retail strategy, I'm going to tap into somebody who's been in a leadership position in retail for 8 years, right? All of that, just you hear that story and you're like, of course, the two mesh, right? Well, that's just to get in. Once you're in, though, and once again, this doesn't just happen. You got to always control your own development, control your career, but you build relationships within the organization, right? And you learn more about the vast parts of the organization, and you build some really strong relationships. You have advocates for you, you have mentors, you have peers, and then moving around within pharma, there's the job paths are numerous. And I had lost a thought prior, which I think falls into what I'm saying right now. It was about runway, right? One of the things when I made that transition was I looked at my runway in retail pharmacy, and it was very vertical and it was very narrow. What I mean by that is, pharmacist, pharmacy manager, pharmacy district manager, regional pharmacist, and then maybe like one or two bigger regional jobs, right? Unless you were moving to corporate, right? Or unless you were moving to different parts of the country, the runway, and I use this frequently, is straight and narrow, right? In pharma, the runway is broad. It's very broad. It's not narrow and upwards. It is horizontal, across, and up. So unless you're going to retire in the next 5 years, right? And maybe some people listening will, and gosh, I would love to be in those shoes. But a lot of people, you think your career is long, right? And you got a lot of years to plug in with work, maybe whatever that work looks, right? So you got to think about that. You got to think about what's my runway at this job, right? And that was the moment for transition, and I think that answers this question. It also, right, is in pharma, your runway is very broad. There's many things you can do horizontally. You don't have to always just, move up. You can move across and learn many different things. And all of those things help you move up, right? So yeah, many things to do. Getting in is probably the most hard is the hardest part. Once you're in, take control of your career and you can do many more things.
I love that explanation. That's like I love that the runway. That's so perfect. Sorry, I really like that example, Deep. And I'd love to make that transition really quick. So moving forward, with everyone listening, so we do have a webinar coming up that Deep is going to be hosting. I'd love for you to kind of give a little bit of a brief synopsis on what exactly that entails, what people can sign up to listen to that about, and a little bit any more details you'd like to add to it as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So Alex and I will be hosting, essentially, but I'll be hosting three of my former clients, right, who made the transition from various roles in retail to various roles in pharma. And it's one thing, I could go on and talk about, this or that and learnings and we will, but I think coming from people who've done it, they were gracious enough to share their experiences and come on. And I can only, I've been their coach, and they're just amazing people to do everything they've done. But they've probably been through a lot more in terms of to actually get it done. All the details of what they had to do to make that transition, all their successes, all their failures. We're just gonna, Alex and I will just host and just kind of pick their brain as to how they did it, and they did it. So, looking forward to that conversation with three former clients who made the transition themselves from retail to pharma.
Awesome. No, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and
And when is
we
that
can
good?
share that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, well, so yeah, so for everyone listening, we'll also make sure that we have the link for that. And I know Deep can also kind of provide that link now. And what is the roughly the date and time
yeah.
for that?
So March 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern is when we'll come on live. And if you are interested, and Chris will share this link too. I think it's a bit long, but I'll try to communicate it as well. It's www.thehappypharmd.com / pharma career path webinar. Say it one
Awesome.
more time. happypharmd.com / pharma career path webinar.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
And for those listening, you don't have to memorize it. We will we will share it. I know it is a little long. But yeah, so I'm super excited to hear more and to listen in on the webinar. And Deep, I'd love to, as we wrap up here, for those who are really, thinking of this as making a transition, that everything you're describing about pharma, that sounds like something that they'd be interested in. And I know we've covered a lot of examples of recommendations you have for kind of getting it in perspective and getting to that mindset. Just like one or two more things you'd recommend for someone who maybe not, like you said, not comfortable yet to just leave their position, but are looking to make a transition. What's the one or two things that you'd recommend they first do in deciding on making that transition to pharma from a role that's completely unrelated?
I never, when I start with a client, I don't recommend pharma, right? Like, not that I don't recommend it, but I'm not like, hey, I'm in pharma, you got to be in pharma. It's first being comfortable with, what I said before, saying that I need to make a change. What that change is, will kind of come once you start putting in the pillars of the three-legged stool, right? Like taking stock, taking inventory of all of your career experiences. And that's the first step, is taking stock of your career experiences. Second is, what do I like to do? What are my strengths? What do I lead with that would make me happy? Then the third stool is kind of what's out there. And that could be roles in pharma. That could be roles outside of pharma. There's, many different roles out there. So I don't want to, I don't pigeonhole and say, hey, all right, you know what, I'm in pharma, you're going to be in pharma. But by our actually, couple processes, I think we have, by our, matching processes and so forth that we have at the Happy Farm D, a lot of my clients are that's where they want to be, right? And that's so my most of my clients, I specialize in this segment, essentially. Now, if you want to be in pharma, then awesome. You've probably done some research about the various roles, right? I would say do that, right? After you've said, I'm going to make a change, I need to expand my runway. I am going to commit to the energy. I've taken stock of my experiences. All those things. And when you say, I want to get into pharma, well, don't say I want to get into pharma. Like, I think that's something, I hear a lot. Look at what types of roles you want to get into. Have some conversations and so forth. And obviously, we're here to help with that as well. So I think that's where it starts, right? And just think about your career. It's long. There's a huge runway ahead. So think about that. Another learning is your career, builds on itself. So when we talk about your experiences, one experience leads to the next, right? You can't skip something. Like you can't, sometimes your next job isn't going to be the job that you want to get to. So it's a transitional job to get to where you want to get to. It's such as, that retail strategy job for me was a transitional job. That it's not where I wanted to, pigeonhole myself either. Right. So think about that. And then, the last thing I'd say is, learn from your successes and failures. Right. And, I had to do that too. You're going to have successful moments in your career and you're going to have failures, and just take stock of all of it and learn from it and apply it. And, and that's how you'll continue to grow. So.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Deep. I really appreciate you being on today. If anyone does have any questions in general, pharma or non-pharma related, what would be the best way that they could contact you?
Yeah, so feel free to shoot me an email at my email is careerrxcoach@gmail.com. Careerrxcoach@gmail.com is my email. So feel free to shoot me an email or leverage if you go on the Happy Farm D website, and there's an application there, and the folks there will make sure it's routed appropriately. As I mentioned, we have a robust match process. So if you explain your interests, then it'll make sure that those interests are getting routed this way. And I encourage you, if you have interest in this area at all, I strongly encourage you to at least listen to people who've done it. Tune into the webinar, and I think it comes a lot better from the people who've done it to talk about how they did it. So I'm actually also curious myself, because I know how they've done it from my perspective, but I'm very excited to hear how they've done it from their perspective. So.
Absolutely. No, super excited to hear everything on that webinar. And again, Deep, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us today on this episode of the Happy Farm D podcast. Again, special thanks goes out to Sandeep Chakrabarty for joining us again today and for providing a lot of his expertise and experience in making transitions in his career, and also what he's seen as a coach as well with his clients. Just want to emphasize again that significance of noticing that moment where you want to make that transition from something that you've been doing for a while or just more comfortable and familiar with, and having that desire to make a switch, make a complete 180 into something that you're not. And just again, that, as we spoke with today, that is a very scary moment, but also it's something that we see a lot with our clients. I just want to put an emphasis on that again, just in terms of seeing that light bulb go off where you figure out, this is what I want to do, and what I'm currently doing, it's maybe okay, or it could be the opposite. You may not enjoy at all what you're doing, and that's a huge component of coaching, right? To see that transition, that light bulb go off, and to see that change from something you don't enjoy, or maybe just want to try something new, and then all of a sudden having that idea just pop into your head, and this is what I want to do, moving forward. And it's just an awesome transition to see. So again, just want to thank everyone for listening today. Please make sure you check out the link below for the webinar that'll be coming up. And also, if you do have any questions, we'd love to discuss with you. If coaching is on your mind, if you want to see if it's a good fit for you, please check out our website at thehappypharmd.com/HPD podcast. The link will also be below. Please feel free to schedule an appointment. We'd be more than happy to discuss with you and to go over all the options and to see if coaching would be a true good fit for you. Again, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.